Hello everybody and welcome to our capsule number 3. Today we are going to review all the grammar contents of unit number 2. Let's remember that we are working on unit number 2 and the name of that unit is Live by the Rules. The grammar structures that we are going to learn during this capsule are the use of have to and be allowed to. The first one, have to, we use it to express obligation. And here we have the structure that we have to pay attention to. First of all, we are going to divide have to in 3 big groups: affirmative, negative, and interrogative. In each of these cases, we have to pay attention to the change between have to and has to. In terms of meaning, these two words are the same, but we have to pay attention to the subject, the pronoun or the noun that we use at the beginning. For example, in this case it says, affirmative, I have to walk the dog, and she has to walk the dog, okay? I express obligation in both cases. Then in the negative form, I use don't have to or doesn't have to. But what happens here? Why do I don't change this one? Because you are changing the auxiliary verb. Instead of using don't, you use doesn't. So the next word keeps the original form. The same happens when we ask questions. I use have to, but with auxiliary verb do at the beginning. And in this case, have to as well. Also, we change the auxiliary verb at the beginning and we use does. Here we have the short answers that we can combine using do or does in the case of the affirmative sentences. And in the negatives, I use no, I don't, or no, he or she doesn't. Have to is followed by the base form of the verb. Subject plus have has to plus base form of the verb. He has to walk the dog. This is very important. The verb that goes at the end, it's in the base form, okay? It doesn't change. Then in the negative and interrogative forms, we use auxiliary do or does. Depends on what we need, depends on the pronoun. Have to is an modal verb and can be used in all sentences. Okay, so in this case, you have here, I'll have to, will we have to, they had to, or Cleo didn't have to. So we can change tenses, future, present, or past. We use have to speak about laws, rules, and obligations imposed by external conditions or by others. Mrs. West says we have to read it. You have to insert a password for this site. We use negative form, don't or doesn't have to indicate a lack of obligation or necessity. You don't have to walk the dog. Faith did it this morning. I didn't have to download the program. It worked without it. Now, the second structure that we are going to study is be allowed. Be allowed is used to express permission. Okay, so you can say you are allowed to do something or you were allowed to do something when you were younger. It changes using the be, okay, and there we can define if it is present, past, or future. I'm allowed, I was allowed, I will be allowed. You use be allowed to talk about what you are and aren't allowed to do. Usually use negative to talk about something that is forbidden. Okay? You aren't allowed to bring food into the shop. Then we have the modal verb must and its negative form must not or mustn't. In this case, we use the same word must or mustn't in case of negative with all the pronouns, okay? You don't need to change. When you want to make it negative, you only add not at the end. So, mustn't. I must tell him. He mustn't tell him. Must you tell him? Okay, so when we make a question, I change the position of the word and I put must at the beginning. Must is a modal verb and follows all the rules of modal verbs. We must send thank you letter. You mustn't put liquids into your carry-on bags. In the interrogative forms, we prefer to use have to rather than must. Okay, so in this case, what do we have to do? No, what must we do? Okay, that form is not really used. Now, when do I use the verb must? You use it to give orders. You must arrive at 9 p.m. To give advice. You must see this movie. To give advice on notices and regulations, students must not bring cell phones into the exam room. In the first person singular and plural, we use must to express what must be done because we personally consider it necessary. I must call Aunt May. She'll think I've forgotten about her. We use must not for talking about prohibitions. You must not text and drive. Making recommendations saying that we must avoid doing something. You must not give your password to anyone. We also use must and must not when referring to the future. I must feed the dog tonight. What is the difference between have to and must? We usually use have to talk about an obligation imposed by someone and must to talk about what we ourselves think it's necessary. I have to work tomorrow. Someone else has established this. I really must tidy my room. I think that this is necessary. Okay? So, the exception to this rule is the use of must in formal notices. Passengers must wait behind the yellow line. Must not versus not have to. In this case, in the negative form, have to and must have very different meanings. You use don't or doesn't have to indicate that it isn't necessary to do something. They don't have to take any money. I've already paid. I don't have to leave yet, so I have time to help you. We use must not to indicate that it is forbidden or that it isn't advisable to do something. She mustn't drive while she's taking medicines. You mustn't accept friends' requests from strangers. Don't need to and needn't have the same meaning and don't have to. But we are not going to focus on those. Now, apart from grammar, you are supposed to study all the vocabulary related to household chores. For example, you have here the daily life vocabulary in which we have some of the obligations teenagers have at home. Okay, some of the things they have to do at home, like babysitting or checking mails or helping with the food, doing homework, okay, and keeping the house livable. That is very, very important. Now, boys and girls, this is all. This is only a summary of unit number 2. You have in capsule number 2 the previous contents. So, this is it for today. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.